right, folks. Welcome, everybody, once again to Irish Sports Daily Power Hour. I'm your host, Mike Frank, here with the Yama, wearing the Steelers hat, man. I'm telling you, Yama's proud of his Steelers. Yama, I was just looking, and this is off topic, but are you guys getting a lot of crazy stuff floating around in your airspace, by the way, up there in Canada? You getting any of
Uh,
these drones or orbs or any of this stuff?
no, I mean, not that I know of. I'm not following
All right. I
closely,
was just
but
wondering if it's just a U.S. thing or not. So,
I
anyway.
mean, there's definitely people who are looking for it out here too. So I don't
I'm,
want to pretend like it. We don't got those people too, but yeah, it's not as prevalent, I guess, in the news.
it's getting crazy over here. So we may not be here next week. You never know. Alien invasion, it could be all over with for all we know. So, all right, folks, we're going to get going here with Power Hour. We wanted to mention if you're not a member of Irish Sports Daily, you can go to the front page of Irish Sports Daily, click on the premium section, and sign up today. Of course, there's lots going on right now with the playoff. And of course, there's going to be portal stuff, and we're going to get into all that. We're going to talk Indiana. Before we do, we wanted to mention our sponsor, which is ESQ. 'Tis the season of giving, so the secret ESQ sale lives on. Use code ISD and get 25% off all online items through Christmas, not valid on gift cards or custom items. Check out ESQ's award-winning dress shirt on your favorite players and coaches and give the gift of style. If you're visiting Chicago, explore all of the ESQ's bespoke options. With over a decade of creating handmade bespoke clothing, ESQ's tailoring expertise will craft you something unique. All right, that's it for ESQ clothing. Check them out. Um, Jamie, there's a lot of news happening right now, and there's some good news for Irish fans, and that Marcus Freeman signed a contract extension. It's our understanding it's an extra 4 years, which gives he had 2 left on the contract already, so he has up to 6 now. It's something that needed to get done, Jamie, and I think it's important for Notre Dame to show the commitment. The other things that we've heard are that there's more money for coaches, their assistant coaches, a real commitment to making sure that the facilities and all the things that you're looking for are up to date and some of the top in the country. So it's obvious right now Notre Dame is putting all their money, all their might behind Marcus Freeman to try and build a championship. I mean, what do you think this does? Do you think this would? Obviously, I think it's a good time to announce it right before the playoff and get some buzz going and make everybody understand that, hey, Marcus Freeman's going to be our guy. You got portal stuff coming up. We're going to talk about that, but everybody can say, okay, well now Marcus Freeman's going to be there for a while if I transfer there. There's all kinds of things that this benefits, but just your overall thoughts here.
Well, I think, yeah, like the length of the contract. First of all, I mean, kudos to ND and I guess for Freeman's age and stuff too, for not doing a 10-year deal or one of these like, Jimbo Fisher type of deals that last, like the Charlie Weiss deal that like you end up, you're even if you do well, you're going to end up renegotiating anyways. 4 years, you got 6 years left. That's great. Like that sounds right. So good job by all those people negotiating that. I think that was kind of refreshing, when you see some of these other contracts that are just way too long. I think it's huge, just stability wise, obviously, like, putting on a front for recruiting and transfer portal, like you said. Obviously, when there's rumors about him, possibly being interested in the NFL or NFL teams being interested in him, that's something that think about how that the impact that had with Brian Kelly.
Yeah.
When he had it, that was obviously a really bad thing for the program. And this was something that kind of got nipped in the bud really quick. That obviously getting this in place, but I think the most important part was the part you said, Mike, about we already know about like the facility upgrades, but the like payment for staff and all the other investment into the program, because that is the kind of thing that is more important than anything, right? Because you can have the head guy and he can be great and all that, But if you're not investing in all the other parts of it and competing with all these other, blue blood programs out there, you're done. You're done, right? So that's the one thing. It's like Marcus Freeman could have had a year this year where, it was like pretty good or whatever. And maybe he gets a contract extension and, whatnot or whatever, but it's not like everything. He's not going to get everything he asked for, right? But the fact that he had the season that he had and they came back after, the setback that they had against Northern Illinois at the beginning of the year, to do that and build up this like confidence within, the administration, the fan base, everyone around Notre Dame is so huge, because that is what makes them say, hey, we got to invest and put more into this. And not that they already weren't doing quite a good job of that, because I think they had done a lot of like upgrades there, but just doing it more so, and not just like, hey, we're not going to invest here because maybe we don't believe in this guy. Well, obviously they believe in him. They're putting their money where their mouth is with all that kind of stuff too, and not just his own like personal contract. So I think that's just huge for Notre Dame's program in general.
I've been following Notre Dame for now. This is my fifth coach. Started under Davey, and of course we had Willingham, we had Weiss, we had Brian Kelly, and now Marcus Freeman. And here's the thing that I'll say: there is no doubt in my mind that Notre Dame fans are more behind Marcus Freeman than any of the coaches previously. And even when he was had some questionable losses, and some people who I would say tend to lean more towards the negative, and people who probably were not very fired up about, hiring a first-time head coach, and it's amazing to see how much support he has gathered amongst Notre Dame fans. So they're very excited about him, and I think that's because, one, Marcus Freeman shows a true respect for Notre Dame, its traditions. It's all the people who made Notre Dame who they were before he got there. I'm not sure all the other coaches did that, certainly not to his level, but he just represents Notre Dame so well with all the things that he, how he gets on TV and talks, and he's just a very likable person. So to me, I think everybody is very excited about the future of this program, and rightfully so. Things are headed in the right direction. The assistant pool is going to be interesting because this is the year, things could happen. Irish fans have been hoping, praying that you hold on to this staff. We've seen, Jamie, what they've done as far as, being able to develop players and keep people, or, keep guys that we may call projectable or whatever, and turn them into really good players. And that's a sign of great coaching. So Irish fans love what they see with the coaching here. And you got to worry a little bit that when you have good coaches, other people are going to notice. And, a guy like Mike Mickens, maybe somebody comes and looks at him as a defensive coordinator, or a Deland McCullum. Maybe somebody goes and looks at him as an offensive coordinator. And then, of course, we know Al Golden. There's been speculation for years that he likes the NFL. Maybe he goes back there. But the good news is Notre Dame's going to make it difficult, I think, financially for somebody to come take these people. And I think, I'd be surprised if you see like a Mike Mickens take a defensive coordinator job in the MAC. You know what I mean? I think it would have to be some Power 4 thing for him to jump. I think he'll be paid pretty well regardless, whether he's defensive coordinator at, say, let's just throw North Carolina out there, because there's certainly a job opening there, but and please don't read anything into that. That's not what I'm saying by any stretch of the imagination. But somebody who's had that much success recently is going to be somebody that you're looked at. And so for me, I'm excited about, it seems like Notre Dame is committed to trying to keep this staff together and give them, at least a fighting chance, because eventually these coaches are going to be pursued. They just are. And we know for a fact that Mickens was pursued heavily by USC last year, threw crazy money at him. And Notre Dame had to step up, did. But I have a feeling that's going to happen again. That's just the way it is. And when you're that good at something, somebody's going to come and offer him some crazy money, whether that's to be a cornerbacks coach and some other blue blood program or the defensive coordinator position. Your thoughts here?
Well, I think no one. The one thing you can, if a guy leaves because he got a promotion, you can never like hate on some guy going because it's like, hey, Dale McCullough gets offered a head coaching job somewhere, and his goal is, he stated goals, he wants to be a head coach. You can't hate on that. You just don't want to lose someone to a lateral move, right? That's the main thing, right? You don't want to lose, like you said, Mickens to a USC where he's doing essentially the same job that he's doing at Notre Dame. No one ever wants to lose a staff member to that, and that's could always be the danger of when you're dealing with like USC. I mean, they must have paid a boatload for all those defensive assistants that they brought in last year, and think about like the SEC is just one of those things where they will pay X amount more than so many other schools. And that's like even like Ole Miss or whatever that you wouldn't expect to be like on the level of like Alabama or whatever. It's like, no, their pool is just as big. Like they're going to pay really, really well if they want someone. So you have to do everything you can to say, hey, here, the money's even. If you want to be here, or the money's better here, we want you to stay and get those people to stay, right? And I also too, I think the staff is been good together. Obviously, they've done a great job together, and you don't want to lose that continuity. The more you can keep that, I think of like, look at how Al Golden's defense has grown over these 3 years, and just like the progress it has. And it's not to say that if he left and like they promoted Mickens to defense coordinator or whatever, like they decided to move in some direction, they wouldn't still be good, because obviously they have a great foundation now, but it took time to get there. Like I expect Mike Denbrock's offense to be much better next year based on like the guys being in the system longer and all that. Like everything is going to make it that much easier. Spring is going to look a lot better than last spring, right? So the longer you can keep these coordinators and your like foundational coaches together, the better it's going to be for the program. And also it's a lot easier to sell like, hey, this is what we did. It's when it's the same guy who did it before, rather than, hey, here's a new coach coming in that's, oh yeah. Well, this is what Notre Dame does. It's like, well, you weren't the guy who developed those guys, right? Like you want to have that same continuity. Those guys who develop them, guys put them in the NFL, they're still there at Notre Dame.
All right, let's get into Indiana, and I want to bring Greg in for this segment to give his thoughts on this too. Obviously, this is a fantastic opportunity for Notre Dame to showcase what they can be. It is so important, guys. I can't even stress. Notre Dame has to get over this postseason hump, right? And it's so important for them to at least win this Indiana game. I think it's doable. I've watched Indiana a number of times. Yama, as you pointed out in your scouting report, they went up against two really good defenses, and the most they scored was 20 points total. So and I think Notre Dame's defense is going to be able to hold them to that. But when you look at Indiana's offense, which is kind of the thing that can scare you a little bit, what are you most concerned about? Let's start with you, Greg.
What I'm most concerned about with Indiana's offense?
Yes.
I think the biggest thing for the offense is just like what we saw against USC, just that puncher's chance of throwing a bunch of slot fades or fade balls or one-on-one shots, right? Like Notre Dame is always going to be vulnerable against that because of the nature of how they play, right? And like I think it's more amplified in this game because of the type of, like, that's how they want to play. I mean, Louisville was the same thing, right? How did Louisville move the ball? They threw a goal ball to Colin Lacey, who made like a one-handed catch, like a great catch. They threw a goal ball to Ja'Cory Brooks in the corner of the end zone. So he made a great catch against Leonard Moore, but he made the catches, right? Same thing against USC. We saw them make plays down the field, throwing the ball in one-on-one situations. Like that's what they do, and that's what they want to do. That's what they want to do. And not just that, but they've seen it on film, right? So it'd be one thing if Louisville tried it didn't work. It'd be one thing if USC tried it and didn't work, but it did. They're going to be trying those things. And so it's kind of like that puncher's chance. The other part is I do think that Indiana is a little bit like they're a little bit better running the ball than I think that like people give so much attention to Rourke and stuff. I think they could be sneaky good running the ball in this game. That worries me a little bit. Not like a lot, but it's something in the back of my mind. Like it wouldn't surprise me if we're like middle second quarter thinking, I don't like how well Indiana's running the ball right now. So like those are the two things, like them trying to push the ball down the field and Notre Dame showing some vulnerabilities there and being a little bit better running the ball than I think we might expect.
Yama, your thoughts here on can guys like Christian Gray bounce back? He had a rough game. Again, I think part of that's tiredness. Part of it is, they played a lot more zone than they normally play in that game, and there were certainly some things that were exposed in that situation. But when you look at this, Notre Dame's, Indiana's passing offense versus Notre Dame's pass defense, having Howard cross back, hopefully getting some guys, healthier again, guys that just had been bruised and had some slight pulls and things like that, just getting them healthy again. Do you expect to see the same type of defense that we've seen so far?
Yeah, I got to be honest. I think Notre Dame's defense is going to whoop them, guys. I'm just going to tell you straight up. Like, I've just watched enough of Indiana. I think they're a good offense, but I don't think the thing is like they might try to do some of the stuff with, like Greg said, like the puncher's chance of like throw vertical quite a bit. I could see it. And they have some guys, they have good receivers, right? But they don't have the same level of receivers that USC or Louisville does. Their top end guys aren't there. They're good. They're not at that level, right? They don't have a Mekhi Lemon. They don't have a Ja'Cory Brooks. They don't have a Colin Lacey. They don't. And that's why I just don't think that like it's not to say that they won't throw deep and try to do a bunch of stuff. Like they're going to try to throw back shoulder. They're going to try to do a lot of these things. But I just don't like the matchup with them against Notre Dame secondary, especially like you said, that they're like kind of had that time to kind of rest and rejuvenate because I just watched them against Ohio State and Michigan's defense, and Michigan without Will Johnson. So it's not like, it's like, well, they're missing Ben Morrison. Well, they were missing Will Johnson. They really struggled against man coverage. They really, really struggled against man coverage. And obviously, Notre Dame plays a ton of man coverage. Notre Dame also does a ton of stuff where they, show you one thing and then give you something else, which helps present things where there's so much with pre-snap decision-making from Rourke in terms of the RPO game, where he's just, and especially against the blitz too, he's like deciding already before where he's going to throw it. And a lot of times like Notre Dame does that. And you think you got man, and then that's not what you're getting. And you get like an Xavier Watts just like jumping a route and like breaking it up or like picking it off. Right. So I think Rourke is going to have a tough time because he's had a tough time when it's been tight coverage and he's had the ball placement has had to be really, really good. That's when he's had a tough time. When teams are playing like zone and he has time to kind of like layer it over like the middle and stuff, he's got great touch. I think he's a good quarterback, but he also has, I think the other thing is what you mentioned, Mike, Howard Cross being back. I think that is so huge for Notre Dame. Run defense, as what Greg said, is like, that could be a possibility. I mean, this is every team. Every team's going to break off some 10-yard runs against Notre Dame, but no one ever sustains that. That has just never been a thing. And especially with Howard Crossback, both their guards are backups, right? Because they lost their starting right guard in the preseason. So this guy who's playing right guard right now wasn't supposed to be the starter. Their starting left guard towards Achilles in November. Well, he didn't play in the Michigan and Ohio State games, and it was struggle town. He was bad. He was really, really bad. And their backs aren't good at picking up the blitz either. Notre Dame and Al Golden, they love to attack. They love to blitz. I don't think if Indiana doesn't run the ball, I think they have they are in huge trouble.
Yeah.
Because if they get a 3rd and long, it's like he will. I respect O'Rourke. He will take a hit and make a throw, but I don't know if it's because of when he tore his knee a couple of years ago, whatever. But he cannot escape the rush. He cannot. He does not have that. So if he's not making a throw, or if there's someone not running open with it, and then he's got to be perfect, he's either going to eat it and take the sack, or he's going to throw it up and give Notre Dame a chance at it, right? So I got to be honest. I watched a lot of Indiana in the last week, and I think their defense, I know offensively, their ranking is better and a lot of their numbers are better. I am way more worried about Indiana's defense than I am Indiana's offense, to be honest.
Kind of how I feel too. And as you mentioned, the Howard Cross situation, Riley just seems to play better when Howard's in there, and that's because obviously they're worried about Howard, and that opens some opportunities up for Riley too. And so I think having those two in there together, they're kind of like the dynamic duo. When they get going in these big games, it's tough. It's tough to stop them. And we've seen them take over big games, one right after another, where they just all of a sudden they just start dialing up the pressure. And I think that's where, with Regine there had the comment that we posted up there. I think that's the advantage that Notre Dame's going to have, and make it very difficult for Indiana to get some passes off and to really hurt them. So I'm excited about that. Now, you mentioned, as you just mentioned there, Notre Dame's offense versus Indiana's defense. You look at the weather forecast, it's probably going to be in the 20s. It's going to be cold. I lived in South Bend for many years. It gets windy, when it comes out. It'll be interesting to see what the wind is, because if the wind becomes a factor, you're going to have to run the football. And Indiana's been pretty stout as a defense as a whole. And so Notre Dame's going to have to do some things to be effective running the football. And then hopefully it will open up some opportunities to take shots. But I think that a lot of fans feel like Notre Dame's going to, run for 250 yards on this team and just gouge them. That's possible. I'd be surprised, though. I think Notre Dame's going to do well and pull away and be able to run the ball pretty well at the end. But I have a feeling it's going to be pretty difficult at first. And Indiana's going to try and take away the run with everything they got right at the beginning. Thoughts here? Let's start with you, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely what they need to do. I mean, every team's tried to do that. I think that it's not going to look like the USC game where, right off the bat, it was, Notre Dame's going to run the ball great in this game. You could just tell, right? On for the very first drive. I don't know that it'll look that way. I do think Notre Dame will have to grind them a little bit more, but and maybe bust a couple explosives. The thing is, though, is the way that Notre Dame wants to throw, it's the wind shouldn't affect it that much. They're used to throwing a little bit shorter, and Riley Leonard is used to just zipping the ball kind of on short intermediate stuff. And wind, and it was windy for the Louisville game. I remember in that game, the towels were whipping around and stuff. Riley Leonard threw the ball really well in that one, right? So I think that the wind doesn't affect them as much as another team would that wants to put air under the ball and do that. So I don't think weather is going to limit Notre Dame as much as it would for Indiana. They definitely are going to have to commit numbers to the running game, but then that also invites explosives too. when you've got a bunch of guys playing up. If you get Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love in the secondary, and there's no one left because you've committed numbers, like that's a bad situation for them. Like the advantages in this game are with Notre Dame. I mean, they have a much easier path to playing well in the conditions to the way that they've always been playing than Indiana. I think they have to adjust whether or not Indiana is accustomed to the cold is kind of besides the point.
Yeah.
The way that they play is the thing that's going to struggle, just the nature of how they're playing football right now.
Yama, your thoughts here?
I think that, I agree that like they're going to sell out for the run big time. And, Notre Dame will have to create some explosives in the passing game. And whether that, I'm going to guess some of that's going to be like screen game, right? Like that's going to be part of it. But I think what you said, Mike, about it being a grind, I don't see them coming out and like just running it down their throat. I would be shocked if that happens. I think, Marcus Freeman mentioned it in his press conference, yesterday, that kind of all the things that they do to kind of like mess up your like blocking schemes and stuff they do, like it's really like constant, like not just like stemming and all that, but there's a lot of like slanting with some other kind of like stunt mixed in, where they just do stuff where there'll always just be one guy just somehow unblocked, right? They do a ton of things like that really help them. But I also think like I've seen some people like disparage their front four. I think they got a good defensive line. Like they're solid across the board. Like I think they got probably 3 guys who are going to play in the league. Like, for Indiana, that's like unheard of, to have like that on your, on your front. I think Mikhail Kamara is like a stud. He's an absolute stud. I would put him, not as an NFL draft prospect because he's shorter. He's like 6'1", 265. So he doesn't have all of the measurables that Nick Scorden and Ashton Gelati have, but he's as good as them, in my opinion. Like if you watch him and just see his impact on the game, like that's someone that Notre Dame, every time they drop back to pass, that they have to be aware of that guy. And they have to double him as much as possible, as much as they possibly can. They do like to, rush 4 quite a bit, but they will do things where they do a lot of like zone blitzes and stuff, right? Where zone pressures, where they're bringing somebody and dropping somebody off, right? Usually like, one of the edges, right? So that's something that, Notre Dame, how they handle that, I think that's going to be important. And I think really like one of the biggest X factors in the game is going to be Riley Leonard's ability to run, because they're going to have to, try to dedicate as much as possible to prevent Love and Price from breaking those long runs. And there just has to be a point where, whether it's a read or a call or something like that, where Leonard gets, they forget about Leonard there and he's able to kind of take a big advantage. But I also think too, just like his ability to like make guys miss and just get something more out of than what he should have, like that is where they're going to like be able to like, I think you're going to need a lot of that to like move the sticks there. I think they got really good players on defense. Like I think they got like both their 2 top linebackers, Fisher and Walker, are both really, really good players. Like they could play on any team. Jalen Walker is like a freak athlete, just an absolute freak athlete. I really like this freshman kid, Elijah Hardy. Like he pops, man. Like he's another one of those guys who's like 0-star recruit. Nobody like, I don't know how he fell through the cracks, but he's a good player and he's a true freshman and he's going to be something. They're, solid at DB, like, and Pons who's another one of those James Madison guys. Basically every single one of those James Madison guys they brought over on defense specifically are very, very good players. Like they're very good players. I don't know how these guys weren't playing in the Power Four before. Like you're great evals, and obviously, some of these guys were guys that they like brought in as transfers to James Madison there, and then brought them along with him. So, and they've developed them and all that too. But I think it's going to be tough to score on them. Like I think it is going to be a grind. Even if you go back to look at like that Ohio State game, they had some big stops in Ohio State. Like if their offense got anything going, they could have had like a big lead there, right? Like because Ohio State really, really struggled. What I thought Ohio State did really well later on as they adjusted is they started doing like a lot of play action and a lot of like quick game, like play action stuff where they're getting the ball out quick. I think not just necessarily to the perimeter, because if you get it to the perimeter, they are really, it's a fast defense. They're going to chase that stuff down, but getting some of those just like short, like the short pass game, like Greg said, a lot of that stuff, like, 5 to 10 yard range where you can just get like a little bit after the catch and do that kind of thing, a little bit of intermediate stuff. I think that is going to be huge for Notre Dame. If they can just like take advantage of their aggression of trying to stop the run and just get some of that. And then maybe won't be like huge chunk plays all the time, but you get like some 15 here, 12 here, like that. Those are going to be big plays.
If they send their linebackers and things like that, I'd love to see Notre Dame use the tight end more in this game. And I think that they have a couple guys that are starting to really play well. And, as we've talked about in Mitch Evans and Eli Raridan, and just get them a little bit vertical though, doesn't have to be 20 yards down the field, but just stop that kind of upfield, safety right at the snap, moving forward, right? Linebacker right at the snap, moving forward. If you can just slow them down a little bit, that should open some running lanes, but you're going to have to be able to hit some of those plays. And I just hope we see that. Now, the other thing, each side has had a lot of time to kind of dissect the other. Notre Dame has some very experienced coordinators in Mike Denbrock and Al Golden. Do you see, Yama, do you see any advantage here for either side that they have this extra time to kind of prepare? Because it's one thing to do it within 5-6 days. It's something completely different if you're a really talented, scheme guy. And we've seen, Notre Dame, it's kind of interesting. Usually Notre Dame comes out really well on offense. Mike Denbrock does a pretty good job of scripting and they get rolling, and a lot of times they score. Usually the only time they don't score is if they shoot themselves in the foot. And then Al Golden, it's always kind of the opposite. First drive is kind of a feeling out period. We're going to find out what you're doing, and then we just lock the clamps down. But do you see this being an advantage for either side at this point?
I don't know if I'd say is an advantage for either side, but I mean, I definitely think that there's going to be a period in the game where, a good portion of the first quarter will be everyone just being like, they never showed this before, right? Like, so I think there's going to be quite a bit of that on Indiana side and Notre Dame side, where there's going to be a lot of like cat and mouse, and then it's going to kind of settle in, and it's really going to kind of come down to kind of adjustments and what they kind of see there. But then also too, like once you get into the game, and I saw this great quote. It was from Miami's defensive coordinator, and he was the guy who was actually the defensive coordinator at Marshall, a few years ago when they played Notre Dame and upset Notre Dame. But he was talking about how most of the time your preparation, you put so much time into preparation, and sometimes you go on there and they're like, man, they're running stuff. We didn't prepare for any of this because it's all different. And then if that stuff's not working for them, they go back to all the stuff you did prepare for. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's like one of those things. So I think eventually you're going to see like a lot of that kind of stuff. And I think that has really kind of been what I notice about Indiana, specifically in those Michigan and Ohio State games, is I didn't think they adjusted very well to what was, what they were struggling with in that game, both offensively and defensively. And, the Michigan and Ohio State staffs like kind of outcoached them as the game was going on in terms of, adjustments. So that's something that I think really kind of popped to me. And that's kind of more of what I'd look for is like, I think Notre Dame has done a great job. I mean, obviously, Al Gould, basically since he's been at Notre Dame, has done such a good job with adjustments, during the game that I think you might see where Indiana might have an edge early, and then Notre Dame kind of slowly takes over in certain aspects because of those adjustments.
Yeah. Let's get into the bracket now. Obviously some big games coming up here. When you look at the games that are coming up, you just go, wow, there's some pretty exciting games that are happening. Certainly Notre Dame's the first kind of game coming out of the gate, and then you have the SMU Penn State game that's at 11 a.m. the next day. You have Clemson, Texas at 3, and then Tennessee, Ohio State. If Notre Dame beats Indiana, they will then have to face Georgia, and that game is going to be on the 1st at 7:45 p.m. But out of these other games, do you see any surprises? Do you think Clemson has a chance against Texas? Do you think, Ohio State bounces back and beats Tennessee? Do you think Penn State is in trouble against SMU?
As I was going through it, Mike, I kind of, and I know it probably won't go this way, but I would lean towards it being kind of chalk, where it's going to, the higher ranking teams are going to win most of them. I think the one thing where you could see it be different is the Ohio State Tennessee game, just because, 8-9 matchup. They're both really, really talented teams. I also think that Tennessee's D line is so good. Like, they're really good. That defense is great. And I just don't know, when you watch Ohio State against like the best defense they face, that's when they've really struggled. Yeah. And so I could just see too, because it's almost like worse that game's at home for Ohio State too, after everything that happened with Michigan.
Yeah.
And believe me, if they come out and it's 3-0 the first series, oh my God,
the stress is going to be crazy. Yeah.
Oh, it is going to be nuts, right? So I think that's the one game that I'm looking at. I mean, call it an upset, whatever. Ohio State, I guess, is favored by 7. And I don't like Tennessee's offense that much. And maybe that's where I can see, I could actually see Ohio State's defense kind of dominating them, to be honest, and Tennessee not scoring at all. So, but I do think that there is a game where it could be like an ugly game where it's just like really tight, super low scoring, in a 13-10 game in the fourth quarter where anyone can kind of win. But other than that, though, I don't know if you're with me, Mike, but I can't see Clemson beating Texas.
No,
at all.
I'd be surprised. Yeah,
I'd be surprised. SMU, I think, will give Penn State a game.
Yeah,
I think they'll give them a game, but I also think that SMU, that they're the team that they're going to go up there. It's going to be cold.
Yeah,
they're not going to. They're the team where it could be like a
really
little bit of a shock.
Yeah,
and also too, that's just a game. James Franklin. If James Franklin was playing Tennessee, I'd say Tennessee, right? But if James Franklin's playing SMU, these are the games that he wins. He wins these obvious games, right? It's the games where it's like close in talent and all that he ends up losing most of the time. So that's the way I kind of see it.
The Ohio State-Tennessee game's at night, so that could affect Tennessee a little bit because it'll be cold in Ohio as well.
Yeah, good point.
But here's the way I look at it. We'll get Greg's opinion here too. Here's what I see on that other side of the bracket. Ohio State's going to do one of two things. They're either going to look at the situation and say, boy, we've really kind of given away our opportunity here, and we're a better team than this. And if they decide that they want to be a great team, I think that they may be all the way into the championship. I think that they're talented enough to beat everybody on that side of the bracket. I really do. And I don't think that there's any great offenses there other than the Oregon offense. And we know that they've played very well against Oregon and had a chance to win that game. Now, I think Oregon's probably a little bit better team than they were at that time, but I think Ohio State is, I would say, out of all the teams that are in this league or in this thing right now, Ohio State and Georgia are the two teams who have the chance to play a lot better than they have. Everybody else, I think, is pretty much who they are. And so it'll be interesting to see this other side of the bracket, what comes out of it. But I mean, to me, I see it as either being in Ohio State in the other side of the bracket or Oregon. I don't see Texas having enough offense when they face a good defense, to beat some of these teams. That's just the way I see it. What do you think, Greg? We'll start with you.
So Ohio State, I think they'll beat Tennessee because I think it'll be close. Like everything Jamie said about their offense. And, we made the point last week on Hit and Hustle. Like, it'd be better if this game was at Tennessee, frankly.
It is. Yeah, I agree.
Just because the struggle would be fine, right? Like they could struggle against Tennessee's defense. They're good. I think Nico is like, he hasn't played really well in a long time. And he hasn't played well. Like, it was like the first 3 weeks against the FCS teams or whoever they were playing, and they were doing like wild numbers, and everyone was like, well, Nico's like, he's the future or whatever. Like, he's going to be an obvious star. I don't know that he's had like a really good game since then. Like, so I think Ohio State's going to turn them over a bunch. And I think they're going to basically win the game on defense. I'm kind of curious, actually, like, speaking about Ohio State, what do you think's going on with Chip Kelly? Because I don't understand. Like, I've seen, like, I followed them a bunch. I've never watched one of their games and be like, man, they're cooking on offense right now. Like, they're really cooking. Like, I feel like they have some good drives, they have some good stuff, but then it's like they'll be stagnant for a couple of series. And then they'll kind of piece it together and they'll kind of like methodically move the ball. I just thought they'd be much more explosive. Like, I thought they'd be more explosive running. I thought they'd be more explosive passing. I feel like the explosiveness is not there with them. Now, this is just, I don't know what their numbers are, but that's just my impression. I'm just wondering, like, what the disconnect has been there. Because I don't feel like they're like that scary, dangerous team that I kind of expected.
I got some thoughts here. First of all, I think their O-line stinks. I don't think they're very good, although they did take, Indiana at the second half, and they ran the ball, which was surprising, and that's how they won. They were able to run the football, and that kind of changed the way they were. But the other thing that I don't think people realize is Will Howard is a very kind of streaky quarterback. He kind of reminds me of Hartman in that, like, he'll look good and his numbers come out looking good, but in the critical moments when he needs to make a play, he just doesn't make a play. And I think that that's what's kind of hurt Ohio State this year, is he just hasn't been very clutch when they needed to make a play. He just hasn't been able to make the throw that they need him to make. And I think that that's really been what's stalled him, the O-line in that. Is the play calling amazing? No, probably not. But I think it's kind of like Mike Denbrock when Riley Leonard was struggling early. What do you call when nothing's working? So that's sometimes a hard thing. And that's just kind of my thoughts. Your thoughts here, Yama?
I mean, I totally agree with the offensive line part of it. I think them losing their left tackle and their center are massive for
center,
them.
especially. That guy was good.
Yeah, he was very good.
Yeah.
And I think that losing those two guys, Notre Dame obviously has lost guys, but they had the whole season to adjust to that. And that's happening when that happens to you in November, which is a little bit like with IU. They had the one right guard. He's played the whole year, right? Well, the left guard, he just came in. It was like first game, Michigan. I'm like, well, good luck, man.
Yeah.
Going against Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, like it's tough, right? So I think that has been a big part of it. I totally agree on Howard too. I just don't think he's very good. Like I think he's just like an above average player, and his numbers and stuff are all elevated by the fact that like the play calling and the receivers and all of that. But I don't think that and I wonder how much it is based on the quarterback and the O line of like kind of like the creativity that like is lacking there in the offense. That because if you watch the UCLA game in the last couple years, I mean they're all track meets, right? Because their defense wasn't great. I mean, obviously it was much better last year in terms of pass rush, but still they gave up a bunch of big plays too. But their offense was just so fun.
The
Like there was
DTR
just
stuff was electric.
it was totally electric. And like I think they missed because Howard, if they had a real dual threat, I think they could really be like dangerous there. And they would do so much stuff. But I just think they one thing they did at UCLA was they attacked the middle of the field all the time. Like all the time. And I don't think that like they just haven't done that a lot. It just there's so much that's just like outside the numbers. And I get it. You have these receivers, but there used to be just so much of that, like, 15-yard in, like they would just hit over the middle for like huge yak. And like, you just don't see that from them. And I don't know if that is on the quarterback. And it's like, just some guys don't feel comfortable throwing over the middle of the field. I'll say that about Rourke. Like, I mean, he'll chuck it over the middle of the field. Like he'll put it there. So that's one thing with him. But I don't know. I just think that like there's something missing there. And it's definitely quarterback and O-line driven, but it just shows you like if you don't have that, it's really hard to be great. You can still be pretty good with obviously Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and like Carnell Tate. Like Carnell Tate's your third best receiver. He's pretty darn good, right?
But
like,
he's not. I mean, that's the crazy thing about it is he's probably their best receiver right now. He's certainly doing the most. If you watch the games recently, he's the guy that's been making the plays. Everybody else is just kind of there. Jeremiah Smith may make one or two plays. Buka may make a couple. But it seems like Carlisle Lake is the guy that he counts on. And so three guys that are really talented and they can't seem to move the football. It really is amazing. Speaking of that, let's switch to the other side of the bracket. If Notre Dame were to beat Indiana, we know that they're going to face Georgia. A lot of people are like, focus on Indiana. It's like, look, the Yama and the Flamong and me, we're not playing in the game. All right?
Yeah, we don't have to.
It doesn't matter what whether we can look ahead because we're not playing in the game. So it doesn't matter. Looking at Georgia, what an enigma this thing is, man. It's just unbelievable to think that their offense can be so bad and yet they have all that talent over there. And even defensively, their defense is scary, but they continue to just give up plays. And you're like, something doesn't compute there. Do you think that continues, I guess, into this? Do you think a team that has been so up and down literally throughout the entire year, the whole year, they almost lost to Kentucky, they've been really up and down. And do you think somebody like that can suddenly become consistent? And sometimes a new quarterback comes in and it's a great thing, especially for a guy like Carson Beck, who has been so up and down and so turnover prone and that type of thing. Do you think that we will see a different Georgia team if Notre Dame makes it there? What are your thoughts here? We'll start with you, Greg.
Different. I mean, they'll be different in their mindset, and just that, like with Carson Beck, I mean, he's been there. This is his second year as a starter now. So like with him, they want to expand the playbook. They want to be able to do like a whole bunch of exotic things. And like, I think that's where they've kind of been hurt. Well, I think the other part is like they've dropped a ton of balls this year. I mean, yes. Like they showed their drop passes number against in the bowl or in the championship game, and I was like, Oh my God. Like if
Yeah.
Notre Dame, I think it was like in the 50s or something. Like it was wild or whatever the number was. It was insane. But I think that's been part of it. It's like they want to do more with their quarterback, and they also have a bunch of receivers who aren't reliable. So that's really hurt them. I think with Stockton, what you saw in the game was everything got simple. What can this guy do? And we're going to just try to do that sort of thing like over and over again. And it simplified everything for them. And it kind of brought their talent out a little bit more. But like, there's no way they're as like the ceiling of their offense isn't as good. I think their defense, the thing that concerns me about their defense is they've been run on. They've been run on. And that's the thing that Texas can't do is Texas is not a good running team. Georgia's been run on a couple of times. Kentucky was running it down their throats when Kentucky had nothing else going on for them. They could do nothing. And Kentucky was running it on them. Georgia Tech was mashing them. Like,
Yes.
And then look, Georgia Tech had like that perfect mix of we can dominate you in the running game, but we can also like hit explosives in the passing game. So they were getting chunks like up and down the field. Like you can get at this defense. It's kind of fascinating to me. Like the thing is they have those pass rushers. If Notre Dame was to play them, like can they mitigate that with the fact that they can just run? And just run and run and run. And I think that's what they would try to do. The other part of this is like that game is in a dome. I think it would be much better if the game was outside somewhere, kind of anywhere. Being in the dome, being in the Superdome in Louisiana, that's a tough situation for Notre Dame. I would much rather play Georgia outside anywhere on grass. I don't want them in the dome, but that's kind of how I think about the game if they were to play them.
Yama.
I feel exactly the same way as Greg does in terms of like the key will be just running the ball on them, because I think if Notre Dame has to drop back and they're in third and Notre Dame struggles in third and long period, but if they're in third and long against that defense and they can unleash like Jalen Walker and some like it's going to be a problem.
They're not even. I bet you they wouldn't even throw the ball. It would be if they're in third and long.
They're going to do a lot of like
we're running screens and we're playing hope to.
There's going to be a lot of that. So, I think the most shocking thing about Georgia is just how not good their O-line is. Like, why aren't they better?
Yeah,
like it's obviously
they've had
like,
some great offensive line. Like if you look at their offensive line recruiting, it's been very, very good. So it's like they should be better than they are.
And they have a bunch of monsters. They're huge, right?
Massive
so it's
dudes,
there's no reason why they aren't better than they are.
They got two good backs too. You know what I mean? They got two really good backs.
Yeah.
They just don't. Yeah.
I don't know. Like I think I do think like one of those things too with like Stockton, who I really liked as a recruit, by the way. Like, and I think he is a really good runner. So that kind of adds a little bit more of a dynamic to them that I think, makes them a little bit more interesting on offense. But, there are going to be points where that guy has to make throws, and can he really make them? Like that's going to consistently, like, it's one thing too. I think over like a 4-quarter game when it's like, there's just ebbs and flows. You might come out and be red hot, but it's like, can you keep that up? And it's like, wow, now that's just like, it's a 1-score game in the third quarter. You got to make this throw. That's a little bit different, right? When it's you're just not like kind of playing with house money there, like they were in the SEC championship game. I think it's like Georgia's the team that no one wants to play because that their raw talent is just like ridiculous. But they might beat Notre Dame and they might whoop Notre Dame. Like that could happen, but I just don't see them going far in it. Like I think they're, at some point it'll stop for them because you can't be that inconsistent all year. They're not a good football team. They're not. They're just
They're a talented team.
Yeah.
They're a talented team. They're not a disciplined team. And
exactly.
And that I think is where Notre Dame has an advantage against that team if they get there. Two more topics. We have the finals that type of stuff. Notre Dame's been focused on that, trying to, wrap up their academic year. A lot of times in those situations, Notre Dame doesn't necessarily play well coming out of it. I don't think that's going to be a factor at all, Jamie, because there's so much at stake. This is what they've been, playing for. So I don't think it'll be a factor. Do you see that being a factor at all?
I don't think so. I mean, like, I don't think that, like, if Notre Dame were to lose this game, that will be like, I'm sure people will bring it up as a topic, but I don't think that'll be the reason that they lost the game. Because the other thing is too, is like, I know it's like, you can say Indiana, it's not like they're playing Clemson, and it's like, these guys haven't been to class all semester. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, at least some of these Indiana guys actually go to school, and actually do some stuff. And I think, like, it is just one of those things too, like, they don't have to deal with the fact that they don't have to deal with the travel. That would be another thing. If they had to go and they're like, well, guys, get ready because we got to go here. And I know it's not a long travel for Bloomington to South Bend, but still, you have to go and you're staying in another place and there's all this kind of stuff. So I just don't think it's going to be as, I think it's something that, based on kind of like how they've approached everything, I think it's something they already kind of prepared for. Yeah. And like, just, and really too, like, if you think about it, they've had those midterms, which have always been one of those things. Everybody worries about that midterm week. They played pretty well out of those situations. So I just don't think it'll be a big factor.
I don't think so either, especially because last week they had off. I think that they could focus a lot on what they really needed to academically, and so this week I don't think it'll be as big of an issue because they just had so much time off before. All right, last topic I want to talk about is portal, and not a lot of action so far. Well, I shouldn't say. I think there's been a whole lot of action. There just hasn't been a whole lot of the behind the scenes stuff leaking out as far as what happens here with Notre Dame. When you look at the needs for next year and you look at, wait, before we do this, one thing I do need to add about the game, kicking. All right. Marcus Freeman says he's healthy. At some point in that game, Jamie, Marcus does like to go on fourth down when it's close. Do you, especially if you have a lead, do you just say, you know what, let's just try and give our kicker some confidence here? Because if you're going to go anywhere, you're going to need some confidence with this kid, and he's got to gain his confidence back. Do you look at that situation and say, you know what, normally I'd go for it, but we got to try and get this kid on track? What are your thoughts there?
No, I'd still go for it. I just think, like, because there's too many things, unless you have like a really comfortable lead. Like, I just think you just can't in this situation, you just can't, as much as you want him to gain confidence and all that, there's just too much at stake to just like say like, hey, this has got to be the priority here. It's like, no, winning's got to be the priority, and whatever's the best decision there. I mean, that's great that he said that he's, more confident. It's to help this. He's been, since before the injury. That's awesome for Notre Dame. And hopefully it, that bears fruit and he's good, because I mean, think about the Texas A&M game. He was great in that game. Like, he was a factor in that game. Those were big kicks and big moments, and he made them. So you just hope that there's going to be some point, I assume, because like I said about their defense, they have good red zone, as good as Notre Dame's in the red zone. Indiana's got good red zone defense. They're stingy. They do a really good job there. So there's a good chance that Notre Dame's going to have to, settle for 3 at some point. And I mean, I think it's probably the biggest question for Notre Dame heading into this. What are they going to get out of Mitch Sheeter? Like, because if he's just making one, it's just like right there. It's just like, make that first one And I think people will just kind of breathe a sigh of relief and just kind of let it play out from there. And I think would be huge. Would be huge.
All right, let's get to portal, and again, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I like the fact that Notre Dame hasn't had the mass exodus. I do think that can be a distraction. When you look at Penn State and their backup quarterback just says, you know what, I'll see you later. I mean, I think that I understand. I don't blame the kid, because I would be very disappointed if a Notre Dame player did that. But I also understand it because if he wasn't good, they could cut him the next day, so that's just what you're looking at. But when you look at this situation, I think that obviously Marcus Freeman has done a good job in communicating with the players on the team. Hey, look, we're not going to, if you're going to leave, can we just please, I'll help you work out whatever you need, blah, 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 whatever you need. If you need my recommendation to go somewhere or something like that, I'll work with you and make sure you do this. Let's just not make this a public situation. And let's just, we'll try and get you hooked up to wherever you need to go, that type of thing. I think that helps, not having that distraction. But knowing this, when you look at the situation, what do you think? Because there are a lot of, I'll just give you some examples. Guys like Rocco Spindler and Pat Coogan, are they coming back? What about Dion Colsey and Jaden Thomas? Are they going to come back? What's going to happen with Steve Angeli and Kenny Minchie? We don't know what's going to happen there. Don't know. If you're Jabron Payne, you're injured, but how much opportunity are you going to have next year? I don't know. Certainly, I don't think you'll see anybody leave at tight end, but you never know. I got to believe at least a couple offensive line, maybe even 3 will bounce, because when you look at the situation, it's pretty solidified for years on end here. We obviously know that Anthony Knapp's going to be playing a lot. We know that Charles Jugasaw is going to be playing a lot. Ashton Craig could be. We know Emil Wagner is definitely going to be. Billy Schrouth. Those guys got a couple years left. So I got to think that at least a couple offensive linemen will bounce. Maybe a defensive lineman or 2. So without knowing the numbers, because we just don't know how many people are going to leave, what do you think are going to be the priorities? And then also, what do you think is going to be the likelihood they're going to get somebody? I mean, we know, like, a lot of people are hoping Jason Onye comes back. I think all 3 of us are in agreement that, that may be a stretch at this point. I'm not saying that he's not coming back, but, just based off of what we heard, there's certainly a possibility he's not.
That it might not happen. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, no fault to Jason Onye. He didn't do anything wrong. There's absolutely nothing wrong, nothing academic, nothing criminal, nothing. It's just people deal with stuff in life, and you get dealt something and you just got to deal with it. And so he's not, he may not be back. I mean, I got to figure they got to try and find 2 defensive tackles, but Yama, it's been so hard. And, look, everybody's like, oh, well, we got Boubacar Traore back next year and Jordan Botelho. Does everybody forget about Mitch Evans? I mean, he tore his ACL about the same time. Was he the same player at the beginning of the year? I mean, it took him, 7-8 games before he really started to become the type of player that you were hoping to see. Can you expect Traore and Jordan Botelho to be the pass rushers that you're hoping for at the beginning of the season? I'd say it's probably not very likely, especially as much as they have to turn, bend, twist, with your knee. That's something that you got to be pretty sure about. So I don't know, Yama. Let's start with you. What do you think here? And we'll get Greg in here as well to give some thoughts. But what do you think are going to be the priorities here? Especially, Chance Tucker, is he coming back? I don't know. There's not a lot of corners. You got a lot of freshmen. It worked out with Leonard Moore, but I don't think that's something you want to do over and over. Start, get a freshman playing as your nickel. And certainly there's, opportunities for other guys, Carson Hobbs and all this type of stuff. But what do you think here, Yama?
Yeah, I think receiver, that's just going to be something that, like, you got to get at least one. Boundary definitely, right? Because I think Colsey, no way he's coming back. Like, I mean, he hasn't played. Like, he's a zero chance he's coming back. So, and then, you know, you're losing Collins. Jaden Thomas, even if he does come back, they've kind of shown that, like, they don't think he's like a boundary.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, you know, not something that they, you know, you don't want to just have like, hey, Micah Gilbert, here's the job.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's what you don't want to have. So I think boundary receiver, I think, is important. If they can get one other like speed guy, I think that's just like a good person. I mean, they got a lot of speed with these younger guys too, but it would be good to get another speed guy in the mix there.
You think
I mean,
he's got to be a field, right? Because they got enough slots.
They got enough slots.
Yeah, you need a field receiver.
They need a field. And then I think that defensive line, I mean, although I think they're going to be like, they'd be okay if they don't land an edge, just because they have enough young guys kind of like coming up that they could kind of survive and do, I think, actually still do pretty well. Like, if they, you know, while they're kind of waiting for Boubacar and Botello to get back to where they need to be. But another like big end, I think, would be.
Do you guys think that they could put Bryce Young on the other side and you know, let him play along with you know, a combination of Burnham, you know, Tui Halamaka, you know, that type of thing? I mean, do you think you could see a Bryce Young on one side and a Burnham on the other, or do you think it, you know, because he certainly is going to have the kind of speed you're looking for? Can he play drop? You know, that's what you don't know.
Oh, well, they're going to, well, I mean, he'll stay at the
strong side
end. Like, yeah, he'll stay there. They would just like, Burnham would play there if they do that. So I think that's what they do, but I think they prefer Burnham to play strong side. So, but I think that would be probably the move that they did if they end up doing that. But, you know, they're also going to have Logan Thomas, who you expect like will make a jump and like at least be a rotation guy next year. I think that's kind of fair to think that he could make that jump. So, and we'll see with some of these other young guys too. But like, I mean, you can never have enough edge rushers, but really, like, at defensive tackle, like he said, you just don't know what's going to happen with Jason Onye. And even if Jason Onye was back, I think you'd still need like one other guy anyways. So I really do think ideally you would get two. The problem is like everybody needs defensive tackles. The guys who are in aren't that good. Like, not guys who are going to plug in right away. Whatever, like, just the fact that Bear Alexander, they're like, well, Penn State's hosting Bear Alexander for Vincent. You're like, really? Like, how many schools does this guy need to go to before people just give up on him? But it's like, people are desperate. They just need somebody. And they're like, well, you know, if he can just like get it right, he could be pretty good. Like, you're always going to take a chance on like that talent at that position. Right. So that's the thing, is that, you know, they're going to have to take bodies. They're going to have to take bodies, and they might not necessarily be. I would say if you take two, you're probably going to, you know, go 50-50 on one of the guys is going to be good and the other guy, yeah. That's probably what's going to happen there. But you need at least two. You do. And then I think DB, I think just, you know, if they can get another nickel, another like nickel / safety type, I think would be big. And, you know, maybe one and getting an outside corner too, just for like depth, just to like actually compete there, I think would be good. Might be tough because, you know, you are going to be returning Gray and Moore. And obviously you got other young guys coming up too, but like when you have like two guys that are going to like start for you in the playoff and then they're coming back, they're both pretty good. It can be tough to get like a top guy, but you never know. Maybe that's something where someone comes in and says, look, I can play for Mike Mickens, and that can help me get there. And but I will say, like, Notre Dame has been fortunate to get guys like Clark and Hurd, who are not just good players and quality, but guys who just like are like, I'm just going to do whatever to like win on the team, right? Like they're not glory guys, right? So if you can find one of those guys or like two more of those guys, perfect.
Yeah.
I think that would be great. Maybe a tight end too, just because they're going to be a little bit thin there, considering, the guys that are leaving. Just another guy to kind of be, I mean, I think you expect like Reardon, Flanagan are going to be good players, but like, what if one of those guys goes down next year?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of experience behind there. You don't want all of a sudden it's like, well, Larson and Flanagan, you guys got to play a ton now, right? It's like, would be nice just insurance wise to get one, serviceable tight end.
Greg?
Yeah, agree with all those comments. I think this, like, I have a feeling that after this week, win or lose or whatever, there's going to be a lot more clarity. Like, no players have entered the portal yet for Notre Dame. Like, Notre Dame pretty clearly wants things to be buttoned up, at least for now. I don't know how sustainable it is after this, because the calendar is the calendar, right? Like, players have to start making announcements and making moves and visiting and stuff. I think everything's been really quiet for Notre Dame, just straight up. Like, again, no one in the portal. It's kind of crazy. Like, even like lower guys, right? Like guys who like you feel like they're definitely going to leave or possibilities to leave. No one's entered. Haven't heard anyone's name like officially, like no one's visiting or anything like that. Like, I feel like after this week, it's going to be a lot more.
Gonna have to,
yeah. We're going to get some good information there. It's kind of unfortunate for Notre Dame. Like, their success in recruiting has kind of hurt them a little bit, as far as like DB, for example. Like a lot of people were upset that Teron Johnson, the player from Northwestern, like he went to Oregon. It's like, yeah, but he wants to start. Like, a player like him's not going to go somewhere and be the third corner. Like, that's not going to happen, right? I wonder if they want to dip into the safety market.
That's what I'm thinking.
Have someone next to Rod Hurd. I feel like maybe they might want to do that. That would be interesting. And the D tackle part, like, it's just it's a really bad need to have. I mean, one guy is tough, and now you need two. They need to find the JJB of the 3-tech situation, basically. And like Jamie said, it's hard. Hopefully that becomes clear, kind of what their plan is there after this week and everything. It's like, I mean, you don't need to go over it over and over again. It's going to be difficult to get the D tackles. I'm interested to know, like, what's Snead going to do? Because you guys were talking about the Viper and stuff. Like, he's a pretty key, like, edge rush guy, and I feel like they can get guys on the I feel like they can get guys on like first and second down, but like, we're talking about like third down, getting after the quarterback. Like, are they okay? Are they going to get Snead back? Right? Like, that he would be the fourth guy.
He's going to get paid. I bet
he might get paid, but maybe Notre Dame wants to pay, right? Like, Marcus Freeman continues to say, like, we're not taking a quarterback, right? Now, look, a lot of those funds, if they aren't taking a quarterback, and that's true, then that's going to go to D tackles if you're going to get some good ones, right? But I just think Snead, like, Kaiser's gone. There is an opening there. I don't know, man. Like, can he get 400-500 snaps next year for Notre Dame? Like, do you like that better than, some other school? Like, that'll be interesting to see. I think it's a little bit more urgent if Snead does decide to leave, just because now you don't have that athlete. He's an athlete, man. Like, he's a really, really good athlete, and that's hard to see walk out the door. You can have KBA supplement. So the Viper kind of rush end situation is really interesting to me, as far as like what they want to try to do there. Because again, Boubacar and Patojo, I mean, we don't even know where they're at. Like, we don't know what that situation is going to be. So that's something to kind of monitor.
Well, I think people think that they'll be ready to go first. No, they're not.
You just don't know. You just don't know. So you can't assume anything.
They have to plan for it now.
And they certainly wouldn't know now. You know what I mean? They wouldn't know now. So you got to plan for it. So you're not going to know that.
You might not even know in spring.
Exactly. Summer's probably when you're going to get your real kind of look at it. So you have to prepare for that. And I think safety is important, as Greg pointed out. Obviously we know Don's going to be one of the guys, or appears to be. But when you look at guys that are kind of emerging there, Kennedy, I think, probably going to play that Don role, so you're going to need somebody like a Tay Johnson or Ben Minich, or somebody to stand up there. And I'm not sure that's a good option at this point. I love Tay Johnson as a athlete, and I love the fact that they have him now lined up as he could potentially play corner. That says a lot about his athleticism, certainly. But it's one thing to play corner. It's something completely different to play safety. And there's a learning curve there. And he didn't play much at all in high school as far as defense goes. So I think safety's got to be something that they look at, and just to protect themselves in case this happens. I think Greg brings up a good point. When you're not paying a quarterback, that's a good, $2 million at least, and we've heard it. I think people thought I was crazy when we were talking about $4 million for these quarterbacks this year. And I knew it was going to happen. A guy like Ewers was probably going to get paid that. And that's a lot of money that you can now focus to put something to. Here's one last thing. If you're Ben Morrison, what do you do? Because a lot of people just expect he's going into the NFL draft and he's going to be drafted, this and that. This is an injury that, you have to rest, you have to recover. I don't think he was ever going to be a guy that's going to run under 4.5. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think you're way wrong.
You think he'll run 4?
Yeah, I do.
You think he'll run 4.4s?
Yeah,
really?
Oh yeah, if he's healthy.
Yeah, I'd be surprised.
He runs in phase with like Marvin Harrison Jr. Either he's just one of these guys who's Jerry Rice and he's just like incredible game speed and whatever.
Really?
But I've never seen Notre Dame has never had another corner who has literally run the route on a back shoulder like him. Like he runs stride for stride.
I think part of it is instincts. He just has very good instincts. I think part of it, but eventually you're correct. You do have to be able to run with the guy, and he's done a good job of that. I just have never saw him as being. I've always saw him as being more of a kind of a long speed guy than an explosive guy. But I don't know. I guess we'll see. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what he does, because could you imagine what it would cost if he wants to come back? You got to pay him. You got to pay, Christian Gray is going to be wanting money. And of course, Leonard Moore is going to be wanting money. So, and you're not going to turn Ben Morrison down. That's for sure. So, I don't know for a fact anything about what's going to happen there, but it'll be interesting to see, what his decision is, whether he's just, I'm going to the NFL, and, it would be interesting to see. I would think that if he knew that, he would say that by now, but he has not said that. So, and maybe he doesn't want to be a distraction to the team, but I don't think I don't know how that would be a distraction, because I think most people anticipate it anyway. So we'll see what happens. All right, guys, fired up about this game, man. I can't wait to see how Notre Dame does. I think it's really important they win this game. It's so important to the program that they win this game, show up, play well, and then let's just see what happens at Georgia. I think they can beat Georgia if they get there. I think there's a chance they can do that. But got to beat Indiana first. I'm excited about it. I think Notre Dame's going to come out and play well. I really do. I think that they're going to come out prepared. They're going to come out focused. They're going to play well. They're not going to shoot themselves in the foot. And I think that they'll win. Could even win comfortably. I don't see them winning by more than, 14 points or something like that, because I think Indiana's defense is pretty good. Do you see this going into the 30s score-wise?
No, I could see maybe Notre Dame getting into the
low 30s,
but like it would be like with turnover help and that kind of thing. But I do think it'll probably be in the 20s ish. Like, I think that's probably where you're going to see it. I think their defense, Indiana's got that is to me, the thing is like people aren't talking about Indiana's got a really good defense. Like they're a very good defense. And I think, not to say that Notre Dame can't put points on them or get some matchups or might not wear them down eventually and then eventually break some stuff later on. But I just think it's going to be a slog for a good amount of the game for both offenses.
All right. What do you think, Greg?
Yeah, that sounds right to me. I'm thinking 28 to something. I think 28 to something. I'll decide later in the week. We don't have to submit our picks till later, but 28 points is about, I think, where Notre Dame ends up there. And I don't like the idea of kicking a field goal. I don't want my kicker like trying to find confidence in 20 degrees, snow, wind.
That's another factor. Yeah.
Get confidence in the warm-ups. Get confidence there.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining the show here. I wanted to say thanks to everybody for listening. Also, remember to check us out on YouTube Live and our YouTube channel. Search for Irish Sports Daily. Make sure you like the channel and subscribe. And we'll talk to you next week, hopefully after a big win at Indiana. And we'll get to talk about the game coming up against Georgia. Thanks. And I know we have some hit and hustle coming up, guys. What is your schedule this week?
We've got Tuesday, Wednesday this week. Jamie's traveling on Thursday. He'll be in South Bend. So he's traveling. So Tuesday, Wednesday, hit and hustle, 12 Eastern time as normal.
All right. And also, Christian and I do plan to do the Wednesday show this week. We're going to talk some wide receivers in 2026. So be looking for that as well. Thanks for watching and listening, folks. We'll talk to you next week on Power Hour.